Fun. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of AngularAir. I am your host, Justin, and we were getting a little crazy here before the start of the show. Of course, the very last second. So, yeah, kind of a hot take intro. We are doing a discussion show today. We've got our panelists, Alyssa and Mike here. Alyssa, how's it going?
Amazing. So happy to be here.
And Mike, what's going on?
Happy to be here. I was chilling in the hot tub earlier and happy to be here now.
Oh, right. Hot tub craziness. All right.
Sorry.
It's not like 900 degrees where you're at there?
I don't go outside.
All right.
It's a constant 70 here indoors.
So you got a hot tub in the house or what?
I think he was making fun of me.
I was not making fun. I was giving.
I was definitely a jab at me right before the show. I shared that my toddler decided to go number 2 in the hot tub. Yes, was in the hot tub in this heat. I don't feel it like Zach does. Sometimes I look over at him. We'll be at like a park or something with the baby, and I'll look over at him, and he literally is like melting onto the sidewalk. And I'm like, you can go sit in the car. Like, you don't have to be in the out right now. I don't feel the heat like that. Do you guys? Like, it doesn't affect me that way.
No. I'm one of the people that prefer cold over heat. Like, if I had a choice between if it was going to be extreme temperature, give me the cold over the hot. Because I can deal with being cold, but because my thought, you can always add layers, but there's only so many you can take off, especially in public.
You've obviously never lived in Boulder.
I have.
Have you? Because there were times when there weren't enough layers. Like, there just wasn't enough. Yeah. And I was like, absolutely cannot. Yeah, no. I go in the other direction. What about you, Shorty? Can you do with heat? Are you fine with the?
So I run hot. So yeah, I get hot. I like to be cool rather than hot. But I love the sun, and I love being out in the heat. It's just that, like, it depends on the time, right? Like if I have to look decent in the sun, then like I don't want to wear like clothes I have to worry about. But like,
if I have to look decent, right? nobody brought like how we appeal to others into the contract here.
I guess I did. Like if I'm at the beach or the pool, or if I'm exercising or working out, then like, yeah, I'm great in the sun, because then like, hey, that's I'm good with sweating and being all crazy, melting in the sun. But like, if I'm going to lunch and I'm like sitting out in the 100-degree weather right at a table, I'm like, yeah, maybe I'd rather sit in some shade or something. I don't know.
I see. Whereas I could literally just like all the time I have yet to meet
like a cat.
I've yet to meet a heat I don't want to be in. So,
all right.
But I'm sure it exists. There are deserts, right? Like, I need to go find them. But yes. So, but oh my gosh, this topic, you guys, they were pre-gaming it last night. That sounds weird. Pre-coding it?
Pre-gaming it. Yeah.
Okay.
I like that. Little sports analogy.
Yeah. I'm so not sportsy. I was like, was that a sexual innuendo? That was not a sexual innuendo. That's sports. I'm so bad.
Sports, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna let Sporty start talking now.
So we're talking the inject function today, right? And this is a function that is a little more usable now in Angular 14. So I guess it's been there before, but now we can use it in places like components and directives, and I think pipes as well, because they're all kind of the same. So what the inject function is it allows us to have a function that we can call to get dependencies, right? So I think maybe the best part, kind of before we dive into that, is to talk about like, how do we do dependency injection right now, today, or what we're used to, right, in terms of dependency injection in Angular anyways. And so like right now, usually what we do is we do, constructor injection, right? Where we might write our component class, and we write the constructor for the component class. And we say, hey, we need service A, B, and C. So we put that in the constructor, and then Angular magically handles the dependency injection for us, right? And provides us those classes newed up, instantiated, all that stuff for us, right? And then if we have a service, we say we want that service to receive other things inside of its constructor, get injected into it. Then we decorate our service with the @injectable right? To tell Angular, hey, look, I want you to inject some stuff into my constructor. You figure out how to do it. And we do that. And then we have services that can have constructors that can get dependency injection through their constructors as well, right? And that's kind of how we typically roll, right? And so then the question I think becomes, what if you want to like not do it that way? What if there's some other way that you want to get a hold of, some dependency, some provider that's in the, dependency tree, but you don't want to have to use a constructor to do it? Is there another way around it, right? And I think this is that inject function provides that potential possibility.
Yeah, I think this is the right way to go about talking about this whole topic, is the idea of, all right, what is dependency injection? How do we currently use it? How does this augment that? And then later on, where it's going to get into debate and we're not going to come up with anything concrete, just some talking points to be able to talk through it a little bit about the why it's there and how to use it. I don't think we're going to actually answer those questions, but it'll be good discussion to chat about different possibilities.
Yeah, for sure. Like, because it's it's kind of a hot topic right now, right? It's okay. This is cool. We've got this. We can use it more, but why would we want to use it? And is there clarity on it? And it feels like to me, like I see some excitement. I see some possibilities, right? But there's there's not that clarity yet. And so we're going to discuss it today and kind of have some thoughts and maybe predict some future things and see what we can learn. I don't know. Yeah.
It's going to be fun. But yeah, I love the idea of dependency injection. And this is kind of like mixing that up and possibly changing dependency injection concerns me at times, because the one thing that dependency injection enables that I absolutely love is testability. To basically say, hey, I'm creating this thing, but it uses other things. And for me to basically say, hey, I'm going to isolate you for my test to say, hey, these are the things that you depend on, and I'm going to control how they work and how you interact with other things. I want to see how you as a unit work. And then tell me how you're using, or show me how you're using the dependencies, because I can create spies and keep track of those other things that you're doing, and keep an eye on and watch you.
Is that not possible with if you use the inject route?
That's what we need to explore, is how does inject fit into that puzzle, and how do we manage to
because the way you're talking about it sounds like there's like innate things that are provided with dependency injection that allow you to spy on things and that allow you to check in and like test these units, and we're saying that those aren't there the other way, or we have to manually build them, and then that's kind of on us, like
possibly. So the idea with constructor dependency injection is that from your unit test, you can say, hey, these are my dependencies, or these are your dependencies that I'm going to give to you when I create you. When at the constructor level, I'm giving those to you, whether or not you're doing it directly by newing up that class yourself, or if you're doing through testbed and providing them that way, are the two main ways that people are doing the test. I don't know of any others. But the idea of saying, hey, here's your ecosystem, I'm going to control that, and then keep an eye on you and find out what you do. Okay. I'm going to call your functions. I'm going to click your buttons. I'm going to do the things a user would do to you, with you, whatever, and see what the results are of that. And that's what testing is. So.
Yeah, kind of
inject doesn't go in at that entry point. Inject can be outside of that scope. So I'm not sure how to best control that environment. Unless could you inject as a provider? But that's a weird that just hit me, and I don't know if that's a good idea or not. So,
good idea. That.
But it's hey, that's what we're doing. We're talking about different possibilities of how to best use this. So.
Oh, I wasn't saying hi to chat. Hi, Richard and Fergus. And Fergus is asking, how does inject work with tree shaking? Did we answer that last time? Was that something we talked?
I don't think so.
We didn't talk about inject at all before.
Hey, Brandon.
Yeah.
Except that we're gonna talk about inject.
Inject. Yeah.
Inject.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like there's a song there, like we don't talk about inject.
We
Or Bruno, I don't know. It's whoever. Yeah, so along those lines with the testing thing, like the dependency injection thing for me is the inversion of control, right? Which is really kind of the same thing. And like, you know, when you're writing testable code, you're doing inversion of control. And this is the concept of saying, hey, I've got this class that needs to do some stuff. I need to, you know, have it receive the things that it needs to do its work, rather than it saying I'm responsible for newing up things, right? And maybe this will segue into the thought of like, how do we test these things, and this concept of what it might get weird with the inject function is that, you know, when I write a class and I say I need to use these 3 other classes, right? If they come in the constructor, then I can, if I unit test that class, I can send it 3 of whatever, right, that have a similar signature or similar look for that class, because my code in that class is not newing up or instantiating those other classes that it depends on, right? So I'm not tightly coupled to that, because that my code is not responsible for creating those. It's just responsible for using those, right? And this inject function, where we say we can use an inject function to get a dependency, I think immediately the thought is, oh, well, because it's a function, then I can use it in another function. So I write a function to do some work for me, right? I don't have to write a class that in order to get dependency injection in it. I could write a function, call the inject function to get some other class and then, or whatever, and then use it in there, and then have my function return something. So now I can call my function instead. Which, if I do that now inside of a component constructor, I call my new function that wraps the inject. But what I've done is I've now put that, you know, usage logic inside of my class, because I'm calling a function. So now how do I mock that function if I want to test my class, right? Wow, it's hard to explain that without showing something.
No, but I followed you. Chow was saying you can still use testbed, but newing is not possible with inject, as far as I can tell from our earlier conversation. But no, I followed you on that.
So it's like, if we go down here, we see, right, so here's an example of we've got this class, right? And in the constructor, they're using this inject function, right, to get an instance of the radio, right? Or they're using a class field here, which gets executed. I mean, TypeScript is transpiling it down, and it basically happens at the instantiation of the constructor time, right? So this call and this call here are okay, and they work. We'll talk about that here in a minute, of where you can use the inject.
Is that is that really how you spell tire? I just can't stop thinking about. Is that really how the spelling? Is that the spelling of tire?
I think it's tire, but you know, I'm not positive. I just can't know.
I'm like, what is happening in the world? Is that really a word? Okay, I'm so confused.
So we got this inject function, right? That's being called, and it's like, okay, get my radio. But I guess even this is a good example of saying, well, my car class is coupled to this inject function, right? Like if for some reason I needed to mock the inject, like how do I even do that if I had to? I mean, maybe there's not a reason to, right? But when we see this, then there's like this tight coupling, right? And so you go, okay, well, how do we start thinking about testing? Like we could certainly have a way to mock radio and have that come through, you know, the provider, the dependency injection provider. But if we had radio in the constructor, right, then we could write a simple unit test that news up a car and hands it an object that looks like this radio and test the code. Does that make sense a little bit? Like that's my concern right off the bat, is kind of like going, okay, well then now this is like, we're doing it in a different manner. Are we really inverting control there, or are we now coupling?
I mean, is there a way to do it in a decoupling fashion with inject? Is that possible? Do we know? Also, thank you, Fergus and Chow. They have both confirmed that I'm not crazy. Both spellings are correct.
Yeah.
Cool.
The interesting thing about like using that inside the constructor, and I think Chow actually had talked about this in some Slack channel somewhere in the internet ether, is that essentially in the constructor you could have an optional parameter, like radio is an optional parameter, and default it to equal inject radio, which allows you to handle that from the dependency injection side, as well as the idea of not having to worry about providing it anywhere else that is going to get passed into it. If that makes sense.
Can you type it out with your typers? I want to see it with your typers.
I don't have typers anywhere. Like
just open Notepad. Like,
whoa, Notepad?
I don't care.
No, now I feel dirty.
Okay.
All right, hold on.
Paint. Do it in Paint.
So while you're prepping that, this example here, right, where we're creating a new provider for car, and then there's this use factory function that is using the inject function inside of it. I mean, this is a function that's using the inject to then get a provider, but ultimately it's going down into providing this car, right? And this car is now an instance of whatever this returned here. So from a test standpoint, we could still test mock car, right? But I think it gets more interesting when we get to the point where we have a function, something like this, that is using inject, and we use the function that this is executing is with inside of the component. All right, Mike, you gonna type some stuff out and we share it?
Yeah, go ahead. You're good. Whatever. The side has a function tune. You need to be able to, and inside the constructor, we're saying this dot radio is equal to inject video, right? This is just a placeholder that takes in whatever X as any, and right. Ignore that code up top. That's just, yeah, I'm in just a regular TypeScript thing, not in an Angular project. So
I'm with you.
This is an Angular project. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not creating a file just to play with this. But
he's drawing the line on the effort he will do today.
I don't want to go through a whole bunch of setup because nobody needs to watch that.
I'm just teasing.
You get what you get, you don't throw a fit.
So if that is how we're talking about doing that, and then let's just come up with something else, and we have a truck, right? Trucks also have radios, but instead of doing it this way, where in the constructor you're saying, oh, hey, I do need radio, and I'm going to get it this way. Instead of doing that, do this, say, all right, I'm taking in radio.
Yes.
But
that makes me feel happy inside.
Then I still have control over it. And then I could say this dot radio.
Can you do a third one that's called, I don't know, semi and
I got vehicles for days.
And show us the old way.
That's the
old way, please. I got vehicles for days. I need a clip of that. That was so funny. Okay. That makes me feel the safest and the happiest. Can you please explain to me why we're leaving line 15 behind? Please. I don't understand.
Say that again.
Why are we leaving line 15 behind? Because that, I'm like, oh God, yes. I can breathe now. And then I go all the way down to, okay, like 29 is like a happy compromise, but 22 and 21, I'm just like, I don't.
It's all about toolboxes, Alyssa. And the reason is that we are talking about this is because this is a tool that we're going to put in our toolbox. The discussion that we need to have is, how am I best going to use this tool? Right? People only had hammers for a long time, right? Or a rock. That's all they did. I hit things with that. And eventually screwdrivers came around. Well, how am I going to use that? What am I going to use that for? I have a hammer. Why not just keep on using a hammer? But maybe there's scenarios.
So this was all brought up with V14 because, like Justin said, the inject has existed, right? It has existed and it's been ignored virtually for a long time. But this has like been re-brought up with V14 and standalone components. So in my mind, I'm waiting for this connection to click of like, is it because of standalone and modulus that we are going to now have a place and a niche for the hammer instead of the rock? Is that why?
I think the key is it's not the hammer instead of the rock. It's the
it's
hammer
not.
or the rock, right? It's and I think that I see this a lot with the Angular stuff. It's
you just said the same thing both times, instead and or. That's like this. You just subbed out the word or and for instead. Like how is what?
Yeah. Okay. It's an array. The hammer and the rock are in an array, and you can pick any combination of them, right? They're not mutually exclusive. So the idea is that hey, if you want to use the rock, cool. If you want to use the hammer, cool. If you want to use them both at the same time, cool. You don't have to pick between one or the other, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, and what Mike was kind of conveying with the toolbox analogy is that hey, it's another thing that we can use. So if you get a scenario where it makes sense, you can reach for that tool and make it happen, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But I think that the question then becomes, when does it make sense? Like what can it help us do? Where can we use it where it's handy? Chow brought up a point that I was going to mention as well, which is like one of the things it allows is inheritance simplification, right? So if you wanted to, are you doing that right now, Mike?
What's that?
Or like an inheritance example? Or I can walk you through it.
We got you. So
like a sweet van or something, right?
Also, you spelled chow wrong.
I know the van is the.
I did. Oh, thank you. Also, Edison, which plugin are you asking about?
I think he's asking about the fire, but could be wrong.
That's just because
it's like literally every episode.
What's he doing? Okay, so that's inherent from the car component. Extends car component. Yeah.
Do you guys ever use protected? Is that a thing in TypeScript?
Yeah, Mike has some opinions, and so do I.
Well, I just learned this week about protected, public, and private in C#, and so I was like, oh wait, I've never used protected before in TypeScript. Why have I never used it?
Hoopty is kind of like a beater car.
Oh,
okay. So in this one, you do a constructor, right? Create your constructor, and just have it empty with nothing.
So VS Code did that. I didn't do that.
We know it was you, Mike.
I do need to call super.
Okay, now call super. Yeah. Okay. Now do another one. I guess. How about a SUV component that extends from van? I think van is the one that did it the other injection way, right? Or the injection way that we're normally doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you now have to. Now your child.
Sorry, Fergus said I'm triggered when I don't see public.
So now if you do inheritance, right, we have to pass. Our parent. It's not. Is it child? Yeah, I guess whatever. This component this class that extends from another class now has to have a similar constructor signature or some way to pass those things that the one it extends from into the super call to make sure that works, right?
And I'm leaning toward, I kind of like trucks because that gives me the ability, like testability wise, I can test the snot out of that, right?
Yeah. Okay. Right. But I'm lost. I don't understand the last one. Can you explain it in different words?
Yeah. So we're extending van component, right?
Yep.
And van component, when we looked at it here, let's co-locate them. I mean, put them in the same place. so that we can look at them side by side, right? So we have the van component, and whenever you create a van, you need to give it a radio.
Okay.
Because you can't ride in a van without a radio.
Yes.
So whenever we
what's a child car?
What's that?
You're killing me, Smalls. Can you cheat? Yeah, like give it a car, like, give it a vehicle name, not a child.
Minivan.
My SUV. Name it an SUV.
Minivan.
Oh, there we go. Minivan. I like it. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
So whenever you right.
Okay. All right, minivan. We got a minivan, and we're extending for van. And van has a constructor that has dependency injection in the constructor, it has requirements in the constructor, right?
So whenever I create something that extends van, it basically needs to say, "Hey, van, I need to create you," which is what super is doing. Super is calling the van component constructor.
Is super the same thing as base in C#?
Yes.
How cool is
now if you
that?
combine them, you get super base.
I'm sorry, what did you just make a joke? Is it for real? Is super base a thing?
No.
I mean, Nikki would like it, so
Nikki.
Fergus, you're wrong. My minivan has a radio.
Oops. Don't have radios.
I have a minivan.
You did just admit that. You did.
That's okay.
So,
but whenever you create a van, you need to give it a radio. So whenever you create a minivan, since it is a van, you need to give it a radio. It's just a matter of, well, where do I get this? I don't necessarily have to have it from here, right? I could do const radio equals new radio. Right? So the minivan is required to tell the van what radio to use. But the minivan doesn't have to get it from the constructor. It can create its own.
But we're not utilizing inject in this example at all.
Right, and that's the thing that inject might help us to do, right? Because if we make a van and the van has its own private, logic that it needs to do, like the van requires a radio, right? And it needs to do some stuff with the radio, and that's great. That's for the van to care about. The minivan is like, hey, I'm a van. But I don't care what you do to get the van part set up. You just do it, right? And then because I'm a minivan, I'm going to dictate that, like, I'm allowing some kids in here, right? But that's but I don't care what you do. So, but if that constructor of van requires that radio, then now the minivan is responsible for telling the van, hey, here's the radio you should use, right?
And you all are ticked because you feel like it shouldn't be responsible for
no.
I mean, that's a strong opinion. No. Just try to illustrate this opportunity that, like, say, look, like, okay, so imagine van takes in like 5 different things, right? Yeah. And we want to extend from it. Yes. Now we have to, every time we extend, we have to pass in those 5 things and figure out how to pass those in, right? And if our minivan doesn't care about any of that, then now we've made it complex for us to make a minivan. And so this could potentially make it less complex for us to make a minivan from a van.
Okay. Let me see.
The use of the inject function could help.
Wait, Mike's typing things and I missed it. No, I missed it. What's happening?
A van also needs an engine, is what I was doing.
Okay, yes, I see.
So what here, it's yelling at us that we don't have an engine.
Oh, you gotta love that. That makes you so happy.
And see, it's a good example of over time, like our code growing over time, right? We say, oh, well, we know the van needs an engine. The minivan doesn't care about it. It's just like, hey, I'm a van, so whatever van does, I'm good. But because it takes that into the constructor, now we have to go to every place that we extend from van and update it to fix it, right? Or to support it.
Yes.
And now you're like, well, where do I get the engine from? Oh, do I new it up? It becomes complex. And that's one of the reasons that, there's people talk about composition over inheritance, right? Is this opportunity to kind of maybe keep out of these scenarios.
I just really feel that, like, that coupling is fun, I feel like you all hate it. I know. But okay, wait. So, Mike, are you going to do a new van example, but instead with inject and make it decoupled, or no?
Yeah. So let's look at which one do we want to look at? This one? Or here, we started with car, right?
Okay.
So let's have some fun.
Oh, that is super fun. Was I just sarcastic? I'm not normally sarcastic. I'm sorry. Can I take that back? Rewind.
Justin is having the time of his mother flipping life right now.
YOLO, baby.
It just made me think of my son who literally thinks any car that is like got four wheels
This
is
way
a
you can
sports
feel
car.
your hair blow in the wind.
Sick burn. I like it.
Sick burn. Okay, so convertible component extends car component, and in this version, you're gonna show us a decouply injecty version that makes you happy. Oh my god, how did you get those hearts so fast? What'd you do?
On Windows, if you hit Windows dot, you're not seeing it in my screen, but yeah. Windows dot on Windows gives you an emoji picker.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's
on
cool.
Mac, it's like Control Command Space.
There is not a built-in emoji picker on Mac.
Yeah.
Shut.
Yep.
What? Hang on. Control what now?
Man, now we're sidetracked.
I know. I'm focused. I'm focused. Show us the decouple example.
I did. This is it. And in here, for you're following this same route. No, whoa.
Oh,
no.
no.
Wow, I lost VS Code. Come back here.
It was because your code was so powerful, it just crashed everything.
Boom. Yeah. All right. Sorry.
We'd add the constructor though.
Why?
Because that's where we see the rubber hit the road. Because we're talking about cars, right? There you go.
All right. So here we have engine, which is an engine. We're going to do this. Do the same thing here. This dot engine is equal to inject engine.
Wait, what? Okay. Hang on. Wait.
I missed an E.
Wait a minute.
Did the same thing. I just expanded and said, all right, we have two things now.
No, you've done something totally new and magical, and this is so cool. And this has never been done before. Hang on. This is so cool.
Are you looking at an emoji picker on Mac?
No, I'm looking at what you just wrote, and it's like so cool. And this has never been done before. Look how cool this is, because it's like the inject function is allowing the mothership to control its own dependencies.
Yeah. So you're saying I did something by not doing something.
I'm very confused.
So we're saying that, hey, we found out that the car needs an engine. So we got to go into that code and add an engine to the car, right?
Yes, but you don't do it in the children, you do it in the mother.
Well, our children are not affected by it because we're using the inject here instead of using constructor injection.
Why haven't we been doing this all along? Look how cool that is. That's amazing.
Because I think that's what we're trying to figure out, right? Is like, okay, this feels like it's solving a problem, right? This feels like it's helping out. So cool, that's exciting, right? But then I guess immediately go to say, okay, if I want to new up the car component in a unit test and test it, what's the complexity of testing that, right? Like if that car component had a constructor that took in radio and engine, I could write a unit test that doesn't need dependency injection, boilerplate or anything like that, right? Just unit test it because it's just a straight class that takes in some arguments. But now I have two things. I'm now tightly coupled to Angular because I'm using the Angular's inject function, right?
Okay, so, wait, is that a bad thing? I didn't know that was something we were ever avoiding in our life.
I don't like to say anything's ever really a bad thing, right? What are you trying to do with it, right? And what are it's the queen size sheets on a king size bed, right? We make decisions and say that, okay, well, yeah, this sounds good, but maybe there's a trade-off over here, right? So I think it's more of, I look at it and, okay, well, let me assess everything that's happening, what I'm buying into, what positives it means and potential negatives, and then figure out, do I want to commit to that or whatever, right?
Okay. So you're saying the first thing is that it is coupling us to Angular, and then you were saying?
Yeah, so like if the constructor took in a radio object and an engine object, then we're not using the inject function. The inject function is an import from Angular, right? So now our class, our car component class, is tightly coupled to a function that Angular provides us, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing off the bat that we get into. And then the second thing is, like, if we want to new up that car component in a unit test, what do we need to do to, mock its dependencies that it's using, right?
So yes, I agree with all that, but I want to take this example where we are just using inject directly, and I kind of want to go through the same thing here with the trucks.
I was thinking the same thing because that potentially solved our testing issues.
Right.
Partially.
Yeah, right.
Partially, it doesn't fully. Wait, explain.
You don't have full control over what inject does without necessarily overriding the import.
Full control.
Yeah.
What
so
do you
want? You don't have the control to say what gets injected at that point. But here, if I what
are you talking about the truck, or are you talking about the car?
No. Okay, so
the car.
Yeah, the car. But the truck solution would help it, right? Because we can unit test and pass in whatever we want. We still have the coupling to Angular, but we get what feels like easier testability, right? Or
so Martin was asking about the private keyword in JavaScript. Gleason said, I think inject makes it harder to test, which is where we're going. Martin also asked, isn't dependency injection supposed to make it easier to test? So if you're just now joining us, hello, welcome. Today we are discussing inject, and perhaps it's faux pas-ness, perhaps it's amazingness, we don't know, but we're going down that rabbit hole together. Dependency injection is the old school / time tested true way of doing things, and it is easier to test. And so now we're looking at, what does that look like if we do it with the inject method instead? Someone asked, who was it? Fergus. I can assume you can use inject within an if. I don't see what would stop you.
I think that's it. Or no?
You think what's it? Oh, your dually.
And Fergus, I don't know if you're talking about that with tree shaking, whether or not if happens, or that, because that isn't really going to help you with tree shaking because you're still referring to it that way, but it may only go and get it conditionally and perform that logic. But I still think tree shaking wise, you're still going to get that code there because there's a possibility that that code can need it.
Could run.
Right. So looking at dually, which is just a truck with side by side wheel tires. So instead of the rear tires looking like these, they look like they go like that. Okay. So we have dualies. Yay. Tires with TY, right? This is for you, Alyssa.
I'd never seen that. I didn't know that was a thing. Is it like you both knew it was a thing and weren't weirded out? You're both fine with it? Okay.
I get your why. Okay. See, I'm bringing it full circle. But here we can still see that we don't need to provide it here if we don't want to. But if there's a specific radio that we need and const radio with Bluetooth. I know I'm old. I used to have radios that didn't have Bluetooth. Never mind. No. Tape decks, 8-track. Yep, it happened. Maybe
the farthest back is a CD case. We had a big metal case in our car with CDs. That's as far back as I can take it.
If I need a particular one here, if this needs to have for dualies need to have specific radios, then I can control that there. Okay. And I have that flexibility. It's kind of a combination of, hey, look, you're just getting your own radio service to the idea of, where's our original one with the constructor? Yes. To here where you have to provide pieces. And it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. Is that it allows this one here to be able to go and get its own. And here, both would work. I can pass it with no values and it goes and gets its own. Or I can say, hey, you need to have this particular one, and that works. which this gives me the ability to be able to new these things up as I want, without necessarily having to put anything into it for a test, and it'll just fly in. It's more of like an integration test, or I can override and mock out my radio service and control it and run those tests in isolation.
That's really cool.
My initial thought is this sounds awesome because it gives me what I want and what my comfort level is without hiding logic, or not, I don't know, without taking away what I'm used to.
But I think even if your team did it, was it the car one? Or even if your team did it in that way, it's still decoupled enough that you could easily rewrite the car component example to be the truck example without having to mess with all the children. So I feel like either one. I feel like either one are pretty,
this example of putting this logic here instead of putting it
there
here.
Yes.
This just makes a whole lot more sense.
Infinitely better. Yeah.
And then also this could easily be private, and I can.
Can you go back to the original way with like dependency injection? Was that at the very bottom? I just wanted to see it real quick.
Are you talking about how we have traditionally done it?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just going to format this so that we can see it a little better.
Yeah. So is there not a way that we've traditionally done it without the coupling? Like, because this is still us having to say radio, right? Inside of the constructor of the shuttle.
Yeah, but it's the inversion of control, right? And it's what I was saying, like it's not coupled to Angular, right? When we look at this band component class, we're not using anything from Angular to do this band component, right?
I see. Yeah.
When we use the inject function, we are coupled to Angular because we're using it. I think it makes sense in terms of creating components. But what I start thinking about in terms of services is like, does the service really need to have coupling to using Angular specific stuff? Or could a service live on its own where I could use it in an Angular app? I could use it in any other app that I want to do, right? I think Mike and I were kind of chatting about this the other night. Like one of the things I see for the potential future of Angular is starting to think more about it doing less, right? To understand that, like, what is it responsible for? It's responsible for working with the DOM, creating components, binding data to the DOM, right? Doing like change detection, and that could be its strong point. But this other stuff, business logic, that sort of thing, like, does that really need to be part of that Angular ecosystem, or could we start architecting in a way where we're able to write that stuff that then, if we need to turn around and use that in a different framework platform, can we get there? And so my mind, when I see this inject, I go to, okay, feels like a good solution somewhere here, but then I also question, like, okay, in a service class, would it make sense to bring it in there and couple it, right?
Yeah. Can you bring in Fergus's question that is at the bottom?
The very last one.
Yeah. The real world example. That's what we're trying to talk through. Is we have this new idea, this new concept to be able to play with injectable things. And we're trying to talk through where is the best way to use this. Is there a good way for us as developers in Angular projects to utilize this effectively, but not just saying, hey, here's a tool, I want to use it. But why would we want to use it, and where makes the most sense to actually use it?
Could you mock out Gleason's, Mike? Is that a hard thing to do? Could you do that at the bottom of this file?
Inject function disassembly. Getting a route parameter, for example. So
what's so exciting?
I don't know if I'm going to do this.
I don't care. I don't care. I just want to see it.
This is going to be a Gleason component.
I love it. And I also like that name a lot. I think
look, you got your own component, bro. And we have a constructor, and this is we'll do it two different ways. We'll do it the traditional way of how we would get route params. And what is this? Private route is activated route. Right. We'll just assume you exist. Class U. Yep. Hey, look, I'm a thing. And then from here, you would say this dot route dot params dot right.
Or the snapshot or whatever, right?
Oh, okay, fine, whatever. You know what I'm saying.
I mean, subscribe. I don't know what that is, but we'll see.
Subscribe. I don't get no sense in here. I'm working. I like Chelsea.
You didn't use it. Wait, what?
In chat. There's a chat message about it.
Yeah, Chow mentions the helpful for library authors like Angular materials doing inheritance. So that whole concept we're talking about, and doing inheritance, like I think that's where it starts to fit really well, right?
Yeah. So real quick, let's look at this, and this is a NGRX component, right? And inside here, I take store, whatever. It's that class exists, so it's that. But this is the NGRX store, and then in here you have a handler, right? And inside there, you would say this dot store dot dispatch, right? And then it would just be some action, right? Right. That's a very common pattern. However, what we're talking about is a new NGRX pattern. Instead of injecting store here, I'm just going to use inject. Right. And I'm injecting dispatch. There's a function which I can just call.
Which won't work.
Oh, yes. You mean.
Because the inject has to come in the constructor. You can't, you can't call it. Yeah, you can't call it from.
Oh, really? It has to be in the constructor? No one said this.
Constructor or a class field, which really gets run at construction time, right?
Okay.
Dispatchinator, right? Why is this const? That's a private.
There's some questions around private, right, in TypeScript, and what does that mean? I'm assuming in TypeScript.
I got it. Do that real quick. So class foo. If I have a constructor and I take something in, private X as a number, this code bothering me, that should be capital F. That code here where I'm putting the private, it means basically create a private variable type number here. And this is just not doing that. And I say this dot X equals X. This pattern right here of creating a private variable and assigning it inside the constructor is extremely common in a lot of programming. So there's shorthand that if you give it a scope in the constructor function, that it automatically creates the property on the class and assigns the value. So it's just shorthand to do this logic where creating the property and assigning it. Cool. Yeah, it's a cool little pattern. It's just a little time saver that is extremely common, especially in Angular with class usage in the framework.
All right. So what were we showing in the?
Oh, we were talking about the idea of doing like dispatch. So I have a dispatchinator property. And I'm injecting it. So these two things would be doing the same thing. That I have an NGRX component. The pattern is, hey, here's your store. Go ahead and anytime that this click happens to dispatch some action.
But weren't we talking about? Were we trying to show the route, like how to get the variable from the activated route?
I think the activated route is very similar to this of dispatching an action, whether or not you're reading it from one place or calling a function from another place. But I think that this is, and actually this is a little bit off. This should be here and there. Cool.
Yeah, I got an example.
Oh, I want to
here. from Nathaniel's site and share
All right.
screen real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. You rock. You gotta share your screen, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I think this is an example from Nathaniel's site where he shows we've got this function, right, for get route param, and it's using the inject function to get the activated route and get the snapshot of the param of this key. And then in the component, you could call that function, tell it your key that you want, and then that's how you can get it, right? And so now this to-do page component does not have a dependency on the activated route. It doesn't have a constructor where you have to inject the activated route. You don't have to go to the logic to figuring out .snapshot.params. We've encapsulated that logic into here, and it's something that's reusable, and now you can just use it in any component to get a hold of the route param, right?
And this is outside of a constructor, so that was like new
Correct,
inject
like this
functionality.
Chow brought up a good point of whether or not we should test that. But so okay, so whether or not we should test the get route param and what have you, right? But the fact of the matter is, if I go and try and write a test for a to-do page component, Justin, can you zoom in a little bit on that? Just make it a little bit bigger. Thank you. Whenever we go to test this, it's going to, whenever we initially instantiate that component, is going to call this function.
Yep.
We haven't mocked out what it's importing, so it's still going to import that same thing and still be calling inject from that function. And therefore, it needs to be available via dependency injection. So you need to tell Angular, hey, what activated route is to be able to do that, because you haven't mocked that, because it's still going to be firing that same logic.
No, but we said it was activated route is like optional, right? Like to do page component doesn't have to pass anything, like to get away with just
optional
existing.
From the constructor standpoint. We don't need to pass it in through the constructor.
No.
But that function that's on line 4 and 5 and technically 6 in the top code block is going to get run when the test runs. So when it calls line 5 where it says inject activated route, it's that function is going to say, psst, Angular, I need this thing called activated route. Go and get it for me. And if you haven't told Angular what activated route is, it's going to blow up and basically return null. And then you try and call snapshot on null or undefined, or Angular throws the exception and like, hey, I can't find that stuff for you. Then you're still in that same point of I still have to know that I need to know or tell Angular what activated route is to be able to use this thing. Except now you're at a point where you don't know what that is because you don't see it in the constructor. It's abstracted even further away. Now, don't get me wrong. I like the way that code looks. I like the idea of not having to inject that in. It's the testing story of what have you.
You see what Xiao just said? You can put that on the screen, Justin.
Yeah. So it's, again, if we sit there and say, okay, I want to write a unit test for to-do page component, right? My unit test is going to new up to-do page component. It doesn't take a constructor, so I could just do new to-do page component. The minute I do that, my test will fail, right? Because internally, this thing is calling this, it's coupled to this function, and we don't know what that function does, right? So we would have to look into this component, find out what its actual internal logic is doing. And again, for writing testable code, the idea is that, you could write a test and use its interface and not really care about what happens under the hood. And it's pretty clear to test it, right? We lose that because now we have to look internally to see that, oh, hey, it's coupled to this. And we have to go further, like Mike was saying, and say, we got to find out what this function is calling because, it turns out that this function is coupled to this and it is requiring this. Yeah. So to write a test for to-do page component, you have to know that you have to mock activated route in some way for it to work, right?
Well, so that's what Joshua said, that he would just mock get route param with that.
Yeah, but start getting to the point of going like, okay, if this calls functions and this calls, let's say this newed up a class, like you're in the same point where like, well, do I have to mock the internals of it, right? And that's not inversion of control, and that's where it's not testable code, because now you have to understand internals to be able to mock it. And if those internals change, like theoretically, you want your class internals to be able to change over time, and the test coverage doesn't care about how that changes because that's an implementation detail. But now we're like, we have to write a test. We have to know the internals because we have to understand what to mock out. Whereas if the constructor had it, then the signature, the API for that class is telling us what it requires, right?
So what is interesting, and I don't know the answer to this, does testbed give us the ability to mock or to basically provide things at like the import level, to basically override TypeScript / JavaScript imports? Because up top it they're not actually showing it inside of the bottom piece there. The line 6 get route param ID equals get route param, that needs to be imported into that component file.
Yeah,
right?
but you bring up like
what?
So what you have is there's a line missing in here. Above at component should be a line that says import curly brackets get route param from a path to the file above. If it there need I don't know what it is in TypeScript, because Angular provides other ways through dependency injection for testing that we don't typically have to worry about mocking TypeScript / JavaScript imports, but that's how all other frameworks are doing their testing. They don't have the concept of dependency injection, to my knowledge, at least not to the level that Angular has.
But you're when you say testbed, you're talking about using testbed to test components, and that's where like I think this gets dicey, because we do have a to-do page component on here, so we might lean towards that. But if this was a service, we don't even need testbed, right? We could just do just a test runner on that, and there's no testbed. So all we're simply doing is newing up this service, right?
And I think you have the ability to override what those are, those imports, through test frameworks, as Chow was pointing out in chat. I don't know how to do it, but I believe they give you the ability to mock JavaScript / TypeScript modules. So again, remember, modules are a TypeScript and JavaScript thing, not just Angular, because Angular has the concept of ng modules, and keeping those two concepts separate is key when talking about this, because I'm talking about the TypeScript / JavaScript modules.
Yeah, Joshua was saying Jasmine doesn't have the ability to mock modules, but maybe Jess
does. Yeah. Like I said, there is some way to do it. I don't know what it is off the top of my head.
This was such, oh my God, a mind-blowing conversation. Like one of my favorite episodes of all time of AngularAir. Seriously, you guys, it was so cool. We can keep going. We're almost to the top of the hour, but I just wanted to say that. Like, thank you for this. This was amazing.
We've got cars, sports cars, minivans, convertibles. Like,
I got cars for days.
Stop it.
I'm sorry, that just got me in.
I still think like it comes back down to, writing testable code and inversion of control, and keeping that as like a, the factor that comes into play here, because yes,
when you first mentioned it though, I was so lost with that concept, but having Mike like walk through very, very slowly and build it up, I was like, oh my God, I totally get what Justin was saying now. It's like you talk at too high of a level sometimes.
I'm sorry,
but I totally get it now, and I see the concerns, and I honestly don't know like which one is like, which give and take is better. And I know that both of you were saying, well, it's just a tool in your tool belt and you just pick it up when you need it. But that feels kind of scary, because then your code could just be kind of hodgepodgey, right? Like, shouldn't you, like, before you decide anything, have very intentions with like, well, this is how we're doing it? I'm like,
I feel like we're taught and told that we should be that way. But I look at writing code as it's an art form, right? It's you have this playground. The compiler tells you what the rules are. Everything else is up to you, right? Mm-hmm. To experience, to build, to learn from, to create, and to have your vision and to make things happen, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about the tools, I think the mentality of going into it, going, okay, I want to get the lay of the land. I want to know what the compiler, requires me to do, right, for the syntax and all that stuff. But I also want to know what options I have what tools to use from. And then from there, I want you to be able to create solve your problems, create it however you want, right? Take examples and take, inspiration from other things. But at the end of the day, it's you as a developer has that opportunity to craft, with this tool set. And you use that and take all the information, learn it, and then figure out what do you want to build and create and craft. That's how I kind of look at it. So it's like, yeah, so I see this as like, okay, cool. It's another thing, another tool that's available to me. And now I just need to discover, how it feels good for me to use it, right? If it does, if it doesn't, whatnot, right?
And I do some woodworking. So with some tools, like take, for example, the idea of a table saw. As you learn that tool, you need to learn the safety that goes along with that so that you're using the tool correctly and properly so that you don't hurt yourself or your code base.
Right. Yeah.
Analogies. I love them.
All right. We are at the top of the hour. I guess we better wrap this one up.
Such a cool episode.
Yeah, this is fun. I like this. We'll have to figure out the next topic or maybe go deeper into the inject. Yeah. Always stuff to talk about. Do we want to do some picks?
Yeah.
I know Mike has a pick.
I got the pick.
You do it, Mike.
Right.
You do you. I'm
All
pickless.
Yeah. Give me Alyssa wanted that code. So
you got him off. You got him off guard. You're doing it for me.
I was sending code. There's a PR 4666 or 63.
Oh my god, are you saying the PR number right
now? I was. I don't have chat open.
At least it's not a SHA that he's reading off.
Oh my god, that's funny.
46663. Justin, if you could pop that into the chat, I appreciate. I don't have YouTube open. There's a PR up for Angular to allow NG and on init to not just return void, but potentially return a function that returns void. And the function that would be returned will get called on destroy automatically for you. So if you create a subscription to an observable in your init, NG on init, you could return a function that calls unsubscribe for you directly. And if you look at it, I also added a comment to, hey, don't just do this NG on init, do it NG on, what is that? After view init. Yeah, thank you, Justin.
Yeah.
So return a function, yep, right there, where it's calling clear interval for you. And then when it gets destroyed, it'll actually end the interval for you.
Cool. We will watch that one with great anticipation to see if it makes it in.
Can't we make noise on it? Doesn't that help?
Oh yeah.
Whoa. You just do this in the chat and then it helps. I don't know.
Can we get that as a GIF? Alyssa, could you record?
Don't you dare. Don't you dare.
There's already too many embarrassing GIFs of me out there. We don't need more. That's fine.
I am picking Cypress 10, the latest version of Cypress. It is a lot faster. It has a lot of nice improvements to the UI for running the test that I'm excited about. One of the big things that I'm excited about is when you launch the UI portion of Cypress, it'll ask you what browser do you want to use when you're going to go hit it. So just a little more usability that's fun to use, and the fact that it's so fast, and then a bunch of other things. So super excited about that.
Cypress
One
10.
little tip that I saw is that I think it requires Node v16 to be running. I tried it with v14. It was airing out. So I had to have v16, but if you were on an Angular 12 project or before, you might be needing to use v14 of Node to serve it. So now there's this kind of you got to serve the site and then run Cypress. And so one terminal running Node v14 to serve an Angular 12 app, and one v16 for Cypress 10. But little thing, not too bad. But yeah, I'm stoked on it. I'm excited. So we'll have to have a Cypress episode where we kind of show
That'd be so
how
fun.
to use it in the power of it. Yeah.
But just, make sure we're up to date on our nodes.
Yeah, right. For sure. All right, no pick, Alyssa. All right. Sounds good. Well, that is a wrap. We are going to put a bow on this thing and bounce. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. See ya.
Bye.